Have you ever heard of the roads that no one dares to cross at night? Well, I have such a story to tell. It was one of those dark, moonless nights when everything seems scarier than it really is. I was driving my truck down a deserted road, the old Highway 66, known for its stories of hauntings and mysteries. At first, it was just another routine trip, but something that night was different, a strange feeling in the air. The radio screeched softly, and my truck's headlights cut through the darkness ahead. As he advanced along the deserted road, a fog began to form, enveloping everything in an ethereal veil. It was as if the environment itself was preparing itself for what was to come, as if it was anticipating something beyond human understanding. It was then that I saw something in the distance, a lone figure on the side of the road. My eyes stared at it for a moment, trying to discern if it was real or just a trick of the light. But as I got closer, the figure became more defined, clearer against the dark background of the night. It looked like a man, dressed in simple clothes and an urgent expression on his face. His gestures were hesitant, as if he was unsure whether to ask for help or continue walking in the darkness. I decided to stop. It went against my instinct to ignore someone in need, especially on such an ominous night. I opened the truck window and asked if I needed help. The man looked at me with dark eyes and accepted the ride to the next town. As we drove, I tried to start a conversation to understand his situation better, but he only responded in monosyllables. There was something about him, an aura of mystery that made me uncomfortable. After a long tense silence, he turned to me and said in a hoarse whisper, "This is where I died." My eyes widened in surprise and terror. I swallowed hard, trying to understand what he meant. He began to tell a chilling story about a fatal accident that happened on that road years ago, describing details that only someone directly involved would know. The truck fell silent as his words echoed in my mind, leaving me with goosebumps and questioning the reality around me. In a moment of panic, I stopped the truck abruptly on the side of the road. I looked back, expecting to see the man, but he had disappeared without a trace. A chill ran down my spine as I wondered if it had all been real or just a hallucination caused by fatigue and fear. I took a deep breath, feeling the cold sweat on my forehead, and decided that the night was over for me. I started the truck and sped away, leaving behind the darkness and mystery that still echoed in my mind. Since that night on Highway 66, I've avoided going there whenever possible. Some say it was just a frightening coincidence, but I know what I saw and felt that night. The feeling of being watched, the shiver down your spine as you remember the man's whispering voice. We may never know for sure what happened on that deserted road, but one thing is certain, there are places in this world where the line between reality and nightmare becomes too thin to ignore. Have you ever heard of the road that cuts through the dense forest like a knife in the darkness? I have a story to tell that will make your hair stand on end. I've been a truck driver for over a decade, and I've seen it all on the roads. But nothing compares to the night I decided to challenge the road known only as Ruta do Mato. It was a stormy night, the roar of thunder echoed through the trees as I drove my truck into the unknown. The road seemed to close in around me, tree branches reaching out like claws into the darkness. Against my better judgment, I turned down that sinister road, fueled by curiosity and challenge. With every kilometer I advanced, the feeling that I wasn't alone grew, as if something was watching me from the shadows. It was then that I saw something in the middle of the road, a figure huddled in the heavy rain. It looked like a young woman, dressed in white and barefoot, shivering from the cold. I stopped the truck, hesitant, but something compelled me to get out and offer help. She looked at me with scared eyes and whispered that she was lost in the forest, looking for something she would never find. Her pale lips barely moved, but her words echoed like a silent warning. She mentioned a fatal accident that had happened there years ago, and how her soul had wandered ever since, searching for the peace she would never find. Fear settled in me as I listened to her story, but also compassion. I didn't want to stay another second in that cursed place. I helped her back to the truck, and as we drove off the route of fear, I could feel the weight of the unknown still hanging over us. Since that night, I have avoided talking about what I saw on Rota do Medo. Some say it's just an urban legend, but I know the truth. There are places in this world where the veil between our world and the beyond is too thin to ignore. For years on the road, I've seen everything, from strange encounters to stories that defy logic. But nothing compares to that night on Route 49. The air was thick with tension, a dense fog enveloping everything like a mysterious veil. I drove my truck forward, following the winding road that cut through an ancient forest. The radio crackled with static, and the truck's headlights illuminated just enough to show the silhouettes of the surrounding trees. It was then that something unexpected crossed my path. A tall, slender figure, dressed in black, was standing on the side of the road. Instinctively, I hit the brakes, my heart racing as I tried to make sense of what I saw. He was motionless, as if waiting for me. His eyes reflected the light from the headlights in an almost supernatural way, and a shiver ran down my spine as I slowly approached. I hesitantly opened the window and asked if I needed help. He smiled, a smile that didn't reach his dark eyes, and said in a calm and strangely melodious tone that he just wanted a ride to the nearest town. His voice had a hypnotic lilt, almost as if he was bewitching me. Against my better judgment, I let him in. During the trip, he started talking about things he shouldn't know, intimate events in my life, secrets kept under lock and key. His every word seemed to penetrate my mind, as if he were reading my deepest thoughts. In a moment of desperation, I asked who he really was. He just smiled again, his smile widening disturbingly. Arriving in the city, he simply disappeared from the truck without a trace. My heart was still hammering in my chest as I tried to understand what had happened. It was as if he had never been there, except for the vivid and disturbing memories he left behind. Since then, I have avoided that road and have never spoken about that supernatural encounter again. Certain experiences remind us that the world is more complex and mysterious than we can imagine. As a truck driver, I learned to respect the roads and the stories they hold. Some of them are more than mere legends, they are windows into the unknown that continue to haunt us even after a long time. As a truck driver for over a decade, I have witnessed many strange and inexplicable stories along the roads. But nothing compares to the night I came across Route 73. It was a night with a full moon, but the dark clouds obscured any brightness in the sky. I was driving my truck down a desolate road in the middle of a dense forest, where darkness seemed to swallow everything around. The truck's headlights cut through the darkness just enough to reveal the eerie outlines of the trees along the way. As I walked along the silent road, I saw something in the distance, a small, frail figure, huddled at the side of the road. I stopped the truck, curious and worried about what could be happening. The figure moved slowly towards the vehicle, revealing itself to be an elderly woman, wrapped in a dark cloak and holding a flickering lantern. Her eyes reflected a mix of sadness and despair. I opened the truck window and asked if I needed anything. She looked at me with tired eyes and told a harrowing story about how she had gotten lost in the woods during a violent storm years ago. Since then, she had wandered aimlessly, trapped in a cycle of darkness and loneliness. Her words were filled with deep regret, as if carrying the weight of centuries of loneliness. As I listened to her story, I felt a shiver run down my spine. She mentioned intimate details about my own life that no one but me could know. My mind swirled with confusion and fear as I tried to understand how she knew these things. She smiled sadly, as if she read my thoughts, and said that the forest spirits kept her informed about everything that happened in that cursed place. I decided to take her to the nearest town, feeling a mixture of compassion and fear. During the journey, she remained silent, looking out the window as if she saw beyond what human eyes could perceive. When we arrived in town, she thanked us briefly and disappeared into the darkness, leaving only the sensation of a supernatural encounter that I will never forget. Since that night on Route 73, I have remained vigilant about the stories the roads carry. There are places in this world where the veil between the real and the supernatural is thin, where the past echoes in the present in ways that defy our understanding. As a truck driver, I learned to respect these mysteries and never underestimate the power of the stories they contain. As an experienced truck driver, I'm used to the mysteries of the roads. But nothing prepared me for that night at the deserted stop where I decided to make a quick stop. Darkness enveloped everything, only the dim lights from the streetlights illuminated the asphalt wet from the recent rain, creating a scene that seemed straight out of a thriller film. As I filled up my truck, I noticed strange movement in the corners of the parking lot. A shadow moved quickly between the parked vehicles, but disappeared whenever I tried to focus on it. The air was heavy, as if something was watching my every move. As I entered the convenience store to pay, I came across a peculiar-looking man. He wore old-fashioned clothes and had a penetrating gaze that seemed to pierce my soul. He approached with an enigmatic smile, as if he had already been waiting for me. He began to talk about the hidden secrets of the road and the mysteries that had haunted that stop for decades. His words were filled with ancient knowledge and an aura of mystery that made me uncomfortable. He talked about events that defied logic and rational explanation, as if he were sharing forbidden secrets. When I finished the conversation, I felt an inexplicable urgency to leave that place. The man disappeared between the store shelves, leaving behind only the feeling that something far beyond my understanding was at stake. I quickly got into the truck, accelerated and left the enigmatic stop behind, knowing that night would never be forgotten. Since then, I've avoided that truck stop like it was a cursed place. As a truck driver, I've learned that some stories are best left in the past, but others continue to haunt us, even on the roads we think we know so well. As a longtime truck driver, I've seen it all on the roads, but nothing compares to the night I made a special delivery in an isolated town. The sky was clear, stars twinkling above me as I drove along narrow roads that wound between silent hills. The heavy truck rumbled softly, its engine echoing in the stillness of the night. When I finally arrived at the destination, I was greeted by a strange atmosphere. The city seemed asleep, the streets were empty and only the yellow light from the street lamps illuminated my path. As I unloaded the cargo, I felt curious glances from residents watching from the shadows, as if they were waiting for something or someone. The cargo I delivered was shrouded in secrecy. It was heavy, packed in sealed boxes with strange symbols and strict handling instructions. The villagers whispered among themselves, casting nervous glances in the direction of the cargo, as if afraid of what it might contain. My curiosity grew along with the feeling that something wasn't right about that delivery. As the night progressed, I began to hear murmurs about unexplainable events plaguing the city. Sightings of shadowy figures in the surrounding hills, strange sounds echoing at night, and mysterious disappearances of villagers. The cargo I had brought seemed to be at the center of it all, a magnet for the unknown that lurked in the shadows. I decided to leave before the night became even more sinister. As I left the city behind, I felt relief mixed with a shiver down my spine. The shadows seemed thicker now, as if they hid secrets I wasn't destined to discover. The truck sped down the dark road, taking me away from that enigmatic place. That night delivery remains etched in my memory as a reminder that the roads hide more than we can imagine. As a truck driver, I learned to respect the mysteries that each load can carry, and to recognize that some stories are only understood when we are in the right place, at the right time. It was a foggy morning when I started my journey with a special cargo. The sun was barely able to penetrate the dense cloud cover, casting a gray light over the landscape. The truck rumbled silently as I drove down the deserted road, surrounded by a silence that seemed to weigh like a veil over the world. While passing through a small sleepy town, something strange happened. The radio, which normally boomed with distant music or news, suddenly went static. The silence that followed was oppressive, as if the world around me was suspended in time. An uneasy feeling grew inside me, as if something was watching my every move. The cargo I was carrying was unusual, mysterious boxes covered in heavy tarps, each marked with strange seals that I didn't recognize. As I drove, I felt an indescribable presence emanating from them, as if the very air around them was electrified. Curiosity mixed with deep uneasiness as I wondered what I was transporting and where I was really going. During a rest stop at a remote station, something manifested. A shadowy, faceless figure appeared in the corners of my field of vision, moving quickly and disappearing before I could focus on it. The feeling of being followed haunted me as I tried to resume my journey, but increasingly, the darkness seemed to have a life of its own. Upon arriving at the final destination, I was greeted by an unusually armed security team. They quickly unloaded the cargo without allowing me questions, speaking only in worried murmurs about the dangerous nature of what I had transported. I was dismissed without explanation, left to reflect on what I had witnessed and experienced on the dark roads. Since that journey, I have avoided talking about the strange occurrences that haunted me. As a truck driver, I learned that there are mysteries on the roads that will never be fully understood, and that some stories will remain hidden in the shadows forever. And so we conclude another trip along the mysterious and intriguing roads of truck drivers. Each story shared reveals a world of mystery and suspense that permeates our journeys. Which of these stories intrigued you the most? Leave your comment below and share your own experiences on the roads. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss any of our next stories. Together, we will continue to explore the secrets of the roads and build a community of fascinating stories. Until the next trip.